one thing about being an immigrant is that it always feels like you're carrying the brand of where you come from with whatever you're doing. Like you always have to show up and represent. And it's tiring. But one good thing or one reminder that happened for me while chatting with Onyeka was, we need to give ourselves grace. Yeah. Give yourself grace to learn, to settle in, to find yourself. You move to a new country and you're starting afresh. Just give yourself some grace. And if you don't listen to this episode at all, if you stop here, just go away, just do this. Give yourself some grace. But Onyeka and I talk about, she talks about, her trying to settle in, dealing with bed bugs, the difference between when she worked in Nigeria and when she's working in the UK, and a ton of other amazing things. Enjoy. So I think for me, like where I want to start off with you is you talk a lot about the importance of finding work you truly love or work you enjoy. Like you write about that a lot.
Yeah.
But was this part of why you chose to leave Nigeria? And is that why you picked UK?
Okay. So I worked in like two different companies in Nigeria, and wildly, I felt like I had very similar experiences with both of them, which is kind of weird because one was a really small company in the juniors and local, and the other was, well, sort of in the juniors, but also a global firm because it was a big four. And when I left the smaller firm, I thought to myself, oh, I'm going to a place with more structure, more, stuff is going to work better. And I got there, and within a year, I was like, that's not so different. It's just a bigger name and a fancier brand, and it's just the same thing. And so eventually I realized that the problem wasn't necessarily the company itself, but just the fact that I was in a country and in a culture where this kind of behavior at work is just prevalent. So people don't respect your time as much. They don't particularly care. I mean, you go on leave and it's really just an extended work from home period because they still expect you to sign in and do a bit of work or attend the meetings you to attend. And I just got fed up one day and I said, okay, where would I have to go where I didn't have to go through this kind of annoyance? And I thought, well, Europe, which is kind of funny because I learned that it was that way in Europe when I was watching Emily in Paris series. The American and then the European, and they told that you Americans, you live to work and we work to live. So I mean, and I feel like that's the way life should be. You should work, and it shouldn't be so pervasive in your life that nothing else can find a space in your life. It should be work. Stop work, you go enjoy life because what am I doing here, right? Yeah, so I began looking towards Europe for just something else. I could just get out of Nigeria for it. And
And
thankfully it worked.
it worked, right?
Yeah, it did. And I got to come to a country that I really did want to come to. Because I thought, well, if I ever had to travel to Europe for a holiday or stuff, I'd love to come to the UK first and particularly come to London first.
Oh,
And
nice.
thankfully now I actually get to live and work in London, which is kind of weird because I've still not actually toured London like a tourist yet. It's crazy.
When you say that, I always find that interesting because I think people always find out that when you travel as a tourist and when you travel to live in that country, like they're two different things.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, they are different. They are.
so you keep you say you when you travel as a tourist, you feel like you can go everywhere. You want to experience things. When you
Yeah.
travel to live there, you're spending most of your time trying to just find your footing and find your community and just basically live.
Exactly, exactly. And that's just what the past 1 year has been for me. And it's just because every time I want to go on leave, my colleagues at work tell me, "Oh, where are you going?" I mean, it's weird. They think of leave here as a time to go explore somewhere and something to do. But because I come from Nigeria, where we think of leave as I'm going to rest, I never really have an answer to give because, and they're like, where are you going to? You're traveling. I'm thinking, no, I'm just going to be on my bed.
You know that no one has put this thing this way you just put it. It's so true. Like, it's so true. Like, we actually think of when we say we're going to go and leave, we say all we're thinking of is I'm just going to turn off my system and sit down at home,
Yeah, just
or maybe go
unwind.
see a friend.
Exactly. Yeah, but my colleagues come back and I was at work one day and I heard someone, she was just beside me working. I don't know who she is. And she was telling someone else, oh, I went fishing. And I turned her like, huh, people go fishing on their leave. That's interesting. I'd love to do that someday. I'm surprised.
Oh gosh, like, yeah, cultural differences are pretty interesting to see, and it's I think it's interesting how you're you're in it. So, let's,
Mhm.
for example, you're in Nigeria, you don't know how different you are, which is why it's pretty good to travel or live somewhere else. Because you don't know how different you are, then you go somewhere else and wow, like, we all have the same struggles, we go through the same emotions and stuff,
Yeah,
but culture means that the way we process them or the way we think about them are just so different, but it's the same emotions, the same problems, the same
exactly.
issues, but
Yeah. I find that very interesting actually when I talk to people who they didn't grow up in Nigeria or who left a very long time ago and have been here for, decades or something. And my former priest, a church, he's been here for over 20 years. And when I have a conversation with him, I can tell it's different from when I'm talking to somebody who has been in Nigeria for the better part of their lives and just moved here, for about a year or two. You can always tell, well, there's something different about the way this person processes the world and how they see the life and how they deal with challenges and how they just, the perspective they have about all this stuff is just different. And I find
mm.
that very refreshing, actually. Really, I do.
Now that we're talking about perspectives, like, I'm curious, like, how has your experience as an immigrant, just, you moved, went through the Nigerian Big Four and all that, moved
Mhm.
here, you're working now here. Like, how's your experience, your immigrant experience, influenced your perspective on career progression and what it means to have a successful career? You know,
I would say so. The way promotions happen here at work is different from what I'm used to back home. So when I worked in the Big Four back home, it was. I mean, you can almost expect a promotion every year, every cycle. They're just somewhere to move up to. But here, they actually expect you to make a case for why you should be promoted to the next level. Like you have to show workings basically that you are qualified to be promoted, that you've done something in the level you were, and you've been consistently exceeded expectations at the level you were, that has prepared you for the next stage. And so when you work, you're looking beyond just getting the work you need to do done. You're also looking at, okay, how can I make the person who's my boss look good, right? And how can I take some of the burden they're dealing with away from them? Because when you step into that role of, I'm a manager, for example, when I step into that role of a senior manager and start to take initiative, doing stuff that at that level someone else will be doing, not at my level, then I'm letting the team know that, okay, I'm ready to move on. And then when it's time to make a case for moving on, there are actually other people there who can speak to you. I wasn't so big on this thing that people always say, show yourself at work and let people know you and play the office politics and those games and stuff. I'm an introvert. I don't I don't want to play those games. I don't even want you to see me. I just want to work and go away, really. For real. But now I'm realizing that I have to be sort of different. It makes me very uncomfortable, by the way. I'm going to be honest about that. When I think about it, I'm like, ah, am I gonna do this? Right? But I realize it's just a necessary part of getting to the next level when I decide I'm ready for that. Right? And I'm just looking for little ways that I can showcase expertise and that I am reliable and can be trusted with work so that when that conversation does happen, there is a track record of doing good work speaking for me. So yeah, it is something new altogether, and I'm just wrapping my head around it as I go. And getting all the help I can get to while I go, because suddenly now I have a mentor at work. It's this Black community, an Afro Caribbean network, and they have this mentorship annual programs they do. So I got into a group. I signed up for it and got into a group, and luckily the mentor in our group is a director with a firm, and he's from Kenya, and he's been here for about 15 years. So he understands how some of this stuff works, and so at least I have someone to hold my hand through it, which is good.
That's a good move, honestly, and I agree with you because I remember one of my first bosses saying to me that when I just moved here, that you need to show like you need to do the work you'll be doing the next level already before you move to the next level. So it's and
Yeah.
like you're right, like it's such a pretty strange thing if you come from Nigeria where basically every year, I mean, you're working, you're doing the work. You tell your boss you're doing the work and you probably get the promotion and all that. And then I also agree with what you say about it can be a bit icky or can feel uncomfortable, because sometimes you watch people that you work with who basically advocating for themselves and it feels strange to you because you're not used to that. So you see them saying stuff
Yeah.
like in meetings, oh yeah, I need a raise, like I need to get you to get, and you're like, wait, how do you all do this? Like, where do you get the
The
guts to
courage
just
and
say it?
confidence to just say that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
weird.
just say it without worrying. Like they don't even care. And I'm like, gosh, like this is something different. Like how? Okay,
Hmm.
so what am I supposed to do? Like I'm supposed to just say, hey, I deserve to get promoted. Give me a salary raise or else. Like it's like I've seen someone who literally almost threaten the boss and be like, hey, if you don't give me a raise, I'm going to think of moving because I think I deserve to be promoted. I'm
Wow.
like, I'm like,
The
okay.
audacity. Yes, it cannot be us in Nigeria. It cannot be us.
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to what I said earlier on about how culture is so different and how it
Mm,
grooms you in so many invisible ways that you don't even know. Like you don't know it has this imprint on you that you can't scrape away. It's there, like it's in there, and
yeah.
you have to reflect on yourself and say, okay, there's this, and this is me, and then there's where I want to get to, and I have to
Yeah.
somehow step out of my exoskeleton and step into that other robot.
That's an interesting way to put it.
Honestly, and then kind of slog forward because oh no, you don't walk forward. You literally push
You
yourself
you
forward
do,
till you
you
get to
do,
that place.
yeah. And I think it speaks to the fact that, sometimes we think we need to, like, growth is easy, but it's not. And so many times you're actually having to do something that just feels so different from who you are and what you're
Yeah.
used to doing, but it's necessary. And so you make room for it, and or in a safe way at the very least, and just find ways to get it done. It's just a necessity at this point.
You know, how do you deal with all this and then still manage what I call the immigrant noise checklist in your head of all the things you need to get done and the feeling of being lonely or being away from home and trying to find stability? Like, how do you balance all this?
Ah, I discovered something.
Tell
Journaling.
me.
I journal. I just
Yeah.
write. And I found that writing just helps me unpack what's happening in my mind. And I didn't start to journal, by the way, until sometime late last year. And even then, I wasn't very consistent until sometime in April this year. And it's I find it quite helpful. It's almost therapeutic for me because, like you said, there's a life I now have here, and there's all the things happening in my head. Like sometimes I wonder, am I doing enough at work? Am I showing up the way I'm supposed to show up? Am I is my brand really speaking? Do I even know my brand anymore? Right? And there's okay, I'm not with my family, so my typical support network isn't here anymore, and I need new ones. And there's I go to church, right? And I sort of got integrated into church more recently. And so I have responsibilities there now too. And there's always all those meetups, and I have one to go to today after this conversation. And there's so much happening suddenly. And when it begins to feel too much, some days I wake up with anxiety. And I'm already counting in my head all the things I need to do. And I have to remind myself over and over again. And this is the second thing, is to just show yourself some grace. I have to literally tell myself, Onyeka, stop. Whatever needs to be done will get done. Whatever you don't get to will be fine for another day. And this is a constant conversation I have with myself. And so I just say, okay, focus on the moment. What do I need to do now? And do that now. And when I'm done with that, what do I need to do next? And then go do that. And if I don't get to the 500 things on the list, I only get to do two or three, then it's fine. I tell myself, you've done your best today. Tomorrow, you do your best again. That's all. But I journal every night before I go to bed. I mean, after my night prayers, I just sit down and I think about the day. I ask myself some very basic questions, really. How did I feel today? And I write down all the emotions I ran through in one day. Oftentimes, there are lots. I can go from happy to anxious to excited to proud of myself to sluggish and everything. I just write that down, and then I ask myself, what parts of today did I enjoy? What went well for me? And it helps me just think back on the day, and from the moment I woke up, and helps me zone in on even the very little things. It could just be, oh, I had the most fantastic lunch, right? Or it could be, oh, I had a call at work that seemed really difficult at first, but eventually I was able to get through supporting this person and, getting some desired results. We need to just make work move forward. It could be anything. And it just helps me refocus my attention on what really matters, right? And get the noise out of the way. And then I ask myself, what did I do to make today better? Or to make, even if it's another person's life better today, what did I do to do that? And it could be as simple as, well, when I was craving chocolate, I chose to eat an apple instead. Or when I didn't feel like working out, I still got up and I exercised. It might not have been my best exercise, but I got through it regardless. So those kind of things, right? And then I ask myself, what did I learn today? And then that is when you really need to sit down and think, okay, all these experiences I had today, what did they teach me? What came to mind? And I write that down. It could just be 1 point or 3 points. Sometimes it's a long shit of stuff I learned today. Really. And finally, I ask myself, what are you grateful for? And I write that down too. And what are you looking forward to? And sometimes I'm just looking forward to the weekend. Oh, I'm looking forward to doing nothing tomorrow. Like now, I look forward to doing absolutely nothing tomorrow, just being in bed. So it's really just extending grace to yourself every day, because it's easy for us to give that to other people, but we don't often think that we are worthy of it too. And I feel like it's something everybody, but especially migrants, need to think about. And it's a big world we've come into, and there's just too many things we're getting adjusted to. And some people just never even entirely get adjusted for the next 10 years. It
Yeah.
happens, but wherever you meet yourself at each day, at your best, at your worst, somewhere in between, just give yourself grace for that day. That's it.
Thank you.
Did that sound like a TED talk?
That was a great TED talk, to be honest.
Awesome.
No, it was, honestly, it was. And it's so true. Because it's just a ton of stuff going on, and you need to give yourself space, to give yourself some grace, and just focus on what you can control, because every other thing,
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to go hit your head on the wall? No, you're not going to do
No,
that.
because then you have to pay your landlord for the wall you've broken.
Exactly. So, just give yourself grace. I totally agree with that. Hmm. Staying on this thing about culture,
Mm.
like, did you have any like? I don't call it misconceptions, but what do you think life and work in the UK would be like before moving? And it was reality different.
uh, would you believe me if I said I didn't really have any expectation?
Yeah, it would. Some people have that gift.
Yeah, so I just okay, first I really simply wanted something better for myself than I had. And in a sense I felt like coming here would give me reasonably better. And it has in so many ways, right? There's for one, I have a bit more control over my time. And I feel like my colleagues are a lot more respectful than what I was used to before. So that was helpful. About life itself, oh my gosh, my first year here was crazy. I felt like everything was just slamming me every direction and I didn't know where to turn. I was so overwhelmed. I cried so many times. And one day I told myself, I think I want to go home. I can laugh about it now. I'm sure you must have read this on Substack. Yeah, so I kind of I don't know, maybe in my head I felt like I would just ease in, quite easily and like fish in water just glide through, but I was deceiving myself because it wasn't that easy. I thought that people would be more reasonable here, you know, nicer, kinder, but I I think the summary I have of everything really is that humans are the same everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, where you have good people, you have not so good people too. And where you have kind people back home, they're the same here. And some people are just not so kind. And I need to just stay open minded about that and hope to God every single day that I just meet somebody who is kind. Not
Yeah.
somebody who's just out there to make your life miserable, or not even maybe they don't even want to make your life miserable, but that they are empathetic and compassionate. We don't always see that, but when you do get to meet someone like that, it's a hallelujah moment, basically. Yeah, so I mean, I've met all sorts of people for real, and everyone it's just the same thing everywhere.
Yeah, that's the humbling thing about moving.
Mm.
First of all, I would say to you, like, just like when you talked about Greece, I mean, understand that immigrating is the most insane thing you can do. Because
Yeah.
what you basically do is you pack your life into 2 suitcases at best, or maybe more, 3 maybe, because the airline is not going to allow you to take 4, because unless you want to pay extra for that.
Yeah.
And then you move to a new country and you start all over again. So it's allowed. But back to what I was saying, like, I think the most humbling thing about moving is that you learn, and I've mentioned it a bit earlier on, human beings are the same thing. Culture might differ, but the same emotions that have ruled us for millions of years are still the same thing. Greed,
Yeah.
lust, hate, like, all those emotions exist. Love, empathy. One of my favorite sayings these days is that, like, the world is full of kind people, but if you can't find one, be one. So that's my favorite saying. And I feel like, especially as an immigrant, be one, because you're already dealing with so much that it
Yeah.
doesn't help you to start walking around with bias or hatred, or like,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to meet a racist. That's okay. The person wants to be a racist. That's fine. It's on
It's the
them.
problem.
I'm not going to allow that person turn me into a bitter person, because you know what's going to happen? I'll get bitter, and then I already have a ton of stuff to deal with. I'm not going to add bitterness from someone else and then use that to spoil my reggae
Yeah,
on my
make
blues.
it your burden too.
No, I'm not going to do that to myself.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's really humbling. But let's go. You're talking about crying. Let's go back to your early days.
Oh my God. I have goosebumps already just thinking about it.
Those first few weeks in the UK, what was hard? What was surprisingly easy? What was
Hmm.
hard?
What was easy? Well, I think it was easy for me to just go back into my silent mode. Like I said, I'm an introvert and I walk into this really, really quiet place. So it's like, oh, I'm in heaven, right? But aside that, I feel like everything else was just difficult. Because first I moved into a house and I'm pausing to say luckily because it felt like it was a lucky break at the time. And you don't really want to come into a new country and have to be hopping around finding somewhere to stay.
Yeah.
And if you are fortunate enough to have somebody who's able to house you for a while, you
Yeah,
also are
that's
thinking
amazing.
about it's good, yeah, but at the back of your mind, you're also thinking about not being an inconvenience to the person too and getting your own place as quickly as possible so you can get out of their hair and not overextend their kindness to you, right?
Yeah.
So I was fortunate to get a place before I moved back from Nigeria. And then, so when I came to the UK, I just moved into my own accommodation straight up. That's where the nice thing ends, basically. Because shortly after that, I stay having this bite marks all over my arm, and I was wondering, am I reacting to something? I mean, the water is so hard here in London. So I thought maybe my body was reacting to a change in environment or something, but turns out it wasn't. It turns out it was bed bugs. And
Oh
I thought,
gosh.
white people have bed bugs, really? Yeah, there were bed bugs in the house. It was crazy. It took me you know, when you start getting so paranoid because I had never seen a bed bug in my life until I moved here. Never, ever before. And then suddenly my neighbor said she found there were bed bugs in her room. And suddenly I started thinking, wait, is that what is also biting me in this room? So the researcher that I am, I went on Google to learn everything about bed bugs. My God, I know so much about bed bugs and I care to know of. I know so much. And I read everything about them, their life cycle, how they grow, how they feed, when they feed. You think I was nursing a baby. So I learned everything about it, and I found that they come out like around 1 a.m. when people are sleeping and your temperature is just warm and your warmth just draws them out to come eat. It's like the buffet is served, come serve yourself. So I was awake one night and I realized, oh, it's 1 o'clock. Let me see if I'll find this bloodsuckers. And then I went hunting. And then I found a motherload of them.
Gosh.
And I completely freaked out. How do you start killing baby bed bugs? That look like you need a microscope to see them. And I think I found the mother too. And it was just a crazy period for me basically. And it took me about 6 to 8 weeks to finally get rid of all of them. Because then I told the landlords and they were just so weird about dealing with the problem. And eventually I decided, as a Niger babe, just deal with this stuff yourself. So I went on Amazon to look for sprays and I bought them and I started doing all the work and it was an exhausting period. So every 2 weeks I'd
Jeez.
respray every 2 weeks and I was sleeping in that room. It was weird.
Because
So
you had no choice.
exactly. So now imagine that you're barely sleeping, you're fighting tiny pests. You're having to settle into a new job in a new country in a new role, right? And with regulations you had to learn, and I had to learn so many things, and all the stuff was just happening at the same time. My mind was a mess. Really, I was when I tell some of my friends what was happening in that period, they're like, it's surprising that you show up every day smiling. How did you do it? I'm like, I don't know. I think God
Shut up.
just Yeah, I think God just kept me because really inside I was freaking out nonstop. And then guess what happens? I find that eventually that the landlord and the actual owners of the house had this weird reef and now they wanted us to move out. And I was just like 5 months in the house. So then I had to go house hunting again. And I did go house hunting again. It's so difficult looking for a house in a country you don't even really know, with the weather that is biting. And I mean, it was the craziest moment I'd ever experienced in my life. And I didn't have family around to support me through it. I did have a friend at work who was really, really helpful. But friends in the end they will have to go home. But he was so
Yeah.
supportive because he would join me to go view these houses and just check in every now and then, you know. But it was so difficult. And I still had to somehow manage to keep up performance at work while doing all of this. Wild, right? And then eventually I did find a new place and I moved in September. And then guess what happens? 3 months after living in that place, and I said 3 months, the first month of living there, by the second month, the landlord comes to say, oh, we have an issue with the council. And if you still want to stay in the house, it means you have to pay almost 2 times your current rent, or you guys have to move out again. So now I have about another 2 months to find another place. Now it's already winter. So I
This
have to
is
run
wild.
around London in winter looking for a house while still working. It was wild. I would just randomly cry and just get so frustrated and so exhausted. So then I eventually did find a house and I was talking with the landlord, and just shortly before I was to move in, the landlord comes and cancels the contract with no explanation. Zero explanation. So again, I'm thrust back in the market looking for another place.
This is
And
all in one. This is all in your first year.
this is happening within 8 months. Everything's happening in 8 months. So it was the most exhausting period of my life. Like, I had never, when you're physically drained. Here I was physically drained, mentally drained, emotionally drained. I had nothing to wake up to each day. I was just it was a drag to get out of bed, to get into bed, to fall asleep. I mean, I was eating like I began to eat my emotions. I put on a ton of weight that period, by the way. Yes, I have lost all of them now, though. But it was. I would not wish what I went through on an enemy, and I don't have enemies to start with. But I would never wish it on anybody else, and I had to deal with all of that stuff. So it was crazy. I got into therapy during that period because I just had to sit down and talk to another person about what was really happening in my life and just get support on how to deal with it. So I was also in therapy within that period too. But it was crazy. But eventually in December, I did get another place, like my current place now, which, guess what? It ended up being back in the same area where I lived the first time. So basically in the same area, right? And I just had to move back here again. So, and sometimes I bump into my first housemates at the park and they're like, oh, you live here now? I'm like, oh yeah, I just live close back. I thought you moved to Source. Oh no, I came back. It's okay. I think about it and I tell myself, well, God does have a sense of humor
Right.
because it's wild, but thankfully, at the end of that year, when I got my performance appraisal at work, everyone said I did well. And I thought,
How did you do it?
so no, all I can say is that I just feel and I think to myself, Onyeka, God really, really, really loves you. Because how? I wouldn't even have told myself I did well. And it was like uncontested. Everyone said, oh yeah, she's good. She's okay. Crazy. Right. So,
That's awesome, honestly. And man, kudos to you for kind of just keeping it sane at work while everything else was going to shit. Because it's hard to do. And
mm,
it's not everyone can do it. Most people just pack up.
yeah, right. Oh well. It's a story I can tell sometime in the future again. Yeah.
Let's go back to more interesting, more happy things. Like a bit not happy, but just more happier than the story you just told me.
Okay.
You had this great thing you wrote about black tax.
Hmm. Okay.
So just if you want to, I would love you to talk through how you think about black tax. I mean,
Hmm.
because for us here, we're like, oh yeah, it's part of what we do. But then again, also it's also a drain because then you you find it hard to save sometimes, or you've saved something up and then some bill comes from home and you have to dig into the savings and push back. So
Yeah.
like, how do you manage that? Because you talk about money a lot. So like, how do you manage that? Like, as the money expert.
um. Okay, for a start, I should put it out there that I feel like I have an unfair advantage when it comes to this because all my
Last born.
siblings, no, I'm not. I have a younger sister. But all of us are out of school, right? And so there's really nobody you're saying you're sending to school or paying fees for. We all have decent jobs. And my dad was really big on getting all his children educated. But my view of black tax is really coming from understanding what my parents had to deal with their own siblings, right? And what I've seen some of my friends or people in my life have to deal with. So it's never been a personal burden for me. I've never been particularly compelled to have to send money to somebody because they are related to me or because their survival depends on me. But I imagine that it's a very huge responsibility to give to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw my dad deal with it. And what I can say about that is there is the aspect where you need to empower your family to the point where they are able to fend for themselves. Okay. But there's also this thing where it's become so pervasive back home. And I think this is something really prevalent with the African culture, where we think it is okay to make a child the breadwinner. It's just wrong, and in every sense of the word. And I know a lot of people might not agree with this, but it's a failing of the parent to actually have a child and then make that child's job to take care of their siblings. No, it's your job as the parent to do that. It's your job to figure out a way to make it work and make it happen. You shouldn't have to send one child to school and then say, okay, we've spent the money we have to educate you, now go and educate your sibling. How will that person ever survive? Now imagine now that this one person has 4 siblings to do this for. And then one day they have to get married and have their own children, but they're still sending other people to school. So every single time you're stuck in this place where you're making money, you're spending all your money, you're thinking about how to make more money, which may or may not be happening for you like you wanted to, right? And everyone just calling you randomly. Oh, send me this, send me that. I mean, come on. Not I think about it, I'm like, what is going on in the person's head who has this responsibility? You know what's crazy? If for some reason that person just packs up, like,
Life just goes on.
exactly, life goes on. Everybody realizes, okay, I'm responsible for myself.
Life goes on.
Yeah, so I think in a sense that the person who is responsible, you need to set limits to what you're doing. Because otherwise, and I think I'll call this the savior complex, because you think it's your job to make sure every other person is okay.
Yeah.
And you might have been given that responsibility, true, but you need to be able to do that, to carry out that responsibility as best as you can, but without losing yourself in the process. Because if you are even unable to grow or to plan for your own future while you are meeting those responsibilities, then really, what do you have? It's like you're waking up every day for a bunch of people who may be your siblings, true, but you're waking up every day. You're literally living for them. That's what it means. So where is the fulfillment and satisfaction in your own life? It's almost non-existent. So if I were in this position, and the advice I've given to people who are in this position but have met me, rather than think it's your job every single time to take someone to the stream and give them water repeatedly, Find a way to empower them so they start fending for themselves too. One thing we'll do is actually teach them responsibility early. And then they stop running to you for every single thing. Maybe you decide you want to carry some of the big expenses. But even then, find a way you can, as much as possible, cut that cost for yourself. Right? Because I'm not going to say, I mean, it's Africa. We have this community-based relationship. So you can't throw that away. But find a way you can, as much as possible, reduce that burden for yourself. I had a friend who wanted to, so he was relocating and wanted to give his sister his apartment, his one-bed apartment. And I asked them, and by the way, he's also in this position where he is, or he is rather, fending for his family. So I said, you're paying this girl school fees. Yes. Why do you need her to live in this entire space by herself? Because it's just an extra cost you're going to be giving her. You're going to give her money for rent for this place also per annum. So why not tell her, if she's going to live here, tell her to find somebody who's going to be a housemate and you can split the cost in half. That's a way to help yourself. Because we want to give our siblings and our families the best, but you cannot kill yourself doing it, because if you are not there, they will be fine. Really, they will all be fine. I've seen it happen so many times. Breadwinner dies, everybody's good regardless. So assume you're not in the picture, what would they have done? And it's tough love, by the way. Because one, you need to get out of your own head that you are not these people's savior. You can help, but in the end, they need to fight for their future too. And don't let yourself be guilt-tripped by your parents into saying, oh, I took you to school, I did this, I did that. It was your job to do that. No, we need to stop getting bullied by parents. It's true. You did your job as a parent. And thank you. You were a good parent for doing your job, but you cannot guilt-trip your child. Many people are moving around with childhood trauma because of this. They literally had no childhood because their parents were the parent to them and then made them a parent to everybody else. And then we have dysfunctional adults growing up to start their own families. It's a pervasive cycle in the Black community that we just need to find a way to break. It's problematic, really. You can see my face, Ashton. I'm so passionate about this topic.
Yeah. You know, I think you make a really strong argument. I don't know what the answer is, because maybe there's a middle ground, because I also think that individual cultures have their pros and cons. You know, and some of the cons are offset by the community-based cultures. But then you also don't want community-based cultures that literally all they do is suck the life out of the ones that are coming up, and then the community breaks apart because the pillars you're raising to hold the community up, you know, just fall apart. You know, although there's something you said that's very interesting, and I had this interesting thought when you talked about the savior mentality, and I just kept wondering whether the savior mentality, or rather the main character syndrome, is a function of how poor a society is. Because I feel like when a society is poor, people somehow unconsciously, because of all that's going on around them and a mix of how they were raised, take on the toga of saviors, who are the ones who are going to pull our people out of this place. And that thing itself just has gone on, and that's become part of the culture. Like, so this is just, I'm sorry, yeah, sometimes I think my head goes cuckoo, and this is just one of my cuckoo thoughts, you know. So it's not anybody who's listening, I'm just thinking and talking at the same time. So I feel like we could probably pull it apart and do some, but I feel like what we are seeing in the community and society is a mix of, you know, developmental conditions, you know, no more poor countries or poor societies, that now bleeds into how the culture is shaped, you know, and how people, you know, we're heroes. We're going to save our community. We're going to save our society. And it becomes a way of living And you wonder if part of just solving for that is when you raise the tide and more boats float up, then it means that you kind of people shed away that thing because you don't have to take care of too many people anymore. So you still keep the community part, but you don't have to carry on the main character syndrome. Because I always wonder, where do we get that main character syndrome from?
You know what's funny, that we actually carry this behavior to work too.
Oh yeah, everywhere. Everywhere. You have to, like, if you're not careful, if you're not someone who reflects on how you behave, like how the things you do, or when you do something, you ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? If you don't do that a lot, you just keep bumping around, and then you wouldn't know you're doing that. But yes, we carry it everywhere. It's not just for saving our little siblings and our parents. No. I think I have just two more questions for you. I think the first one is, how has your definition of home changed since you moved? So what does home mean to you now?
That's an interesting question. Honestly, I feel like home is just where I can have peace of mind at this point. And I used to think of home as being a place before. Like the four walls of a building, and what that building represents to me. But now I really feel like it's anywhere I can find my tribe. The people I can feel most like myself with, and who just give me room to spread my wings and find just how much I can become. Yeah, that's what I think of home these days. And it might be my family, and it can be friends I meet in a new country, or in church, or at work. But it's more of it's less of a physical thing for me now, and it's more how they make me feel, and a sense of identity I get just from being around them.
Just to follow up on that, and so when you say sense of identity, what's your identity now?
Good question. These days, I feel like these days I'm a lot more open to what my future could look like. I've been carrying in my mind for a lot lately, and saying I'm going to be a CRO someday, a chief risk officer, by the way. Yeah. And I don't know how it's gonna happen or when it's gonna happen, but I'm thinking I'm gonna be one in Microsoft. It's weird. I mean, I have that written down somewhere. I have a book titled How to Be a CRO. That's yeah. And I had something in my journal once, a prompt that said, what has been your most pervasive dream? And I had this prompt a couple of months ago. And the response I gave to my journal was, I don't know. I haven't done a lot of dreaming. And that struck something in me, because when I was back home, because there was just always so much happening, I didn't have a lot of time to really think about myself and what I wanted for me. It felt like I was always checking off stuff on the list and jumping through traffic to work back home, doing stuff at home, and just getting 5 hours of sleep and doing it all over again. But after I had that, and it was like I came into this place with the same kind of energy. And after I had that prompt, I had to stop and ask myself, why did you stop dreaming? Because I have a couple of people around me who they have so much faith in me. They have more faith in me than I have in myself. When someone is telling you, I knew you could do it, you're so intelligent. And you're like, who are you talking to, please? Yeah. But the more I've been around people like this, and I have a really good friend who does this a lot to me, right? The more I've had to listen to them talk about me to me, the more I realize lately that I feel like a more confident person. I'm actually dreaming. Like, I'm in the shower, and my mind is I'm in the shower and I'm in a boardroom, having meetings with executives. And and I come out, I'm like, damn, girl. So they give you wings to fly, and you start to see all the many possibilities that your life could become in a way that you've never really thought of before. So as I am today, I am so eager to meet myself in 10 years. Yeah. And I just look forward to meeting me then. I don't know what I'll be like then, but I know I'm going to be so proud of me and how far I've come. Yeah. And it's just really by the people have had in my space and the kind of words they speak into me, and just learning also to speak graciously to myself with kindness. And just when I go into my Bible to read, I'm looking at God's word and I'm saying, yes, yes, Onyeka, this is you. This is your life, you know? And I'm speaking those things to myself every day. So it's like my brain has been rewired. I'm discovering myself more in a way that I didn't get a chance to do for the past almost 30 years of my life. And I am just so excited for this person. Yeah. Are you excited for her too?
I am. Like,
Yeah.
I can't wait to see the person in 10 years, honestly.
Okay.
I think just the round of the last question is, if you were restarting your immigrant journey, like, what would you do differently knowing all you know now?
In summary, really, something I've already mentioned before, I'd come in here with a bit more, again, grace, because I felt like I had everything figured out before when I moved in. And so when those challenges began to come up, it was so overwhelming for me to deal with them. But if I were to do this all over again, I'd just tell myself, look, you are going into an entirely new, you're uprooting yourself and rooting yourself somewhere else. And anything can happen in this process. So meet yourself every day where you are. Whatever version of yourself you meet today, just show her as much love and kindness and empathy and compassion that she needs. I would tell myself that, and I would just approach every single day that way.
Thank you. Honestly, thank you so much. This has been good in so many ways. Like, it's like an advice to myself also. So thank you.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, because it's I'm doing this thing called method writing. Part of it is finding your voice, like finding the deep voice inside you that drives all you do. Because a lot of times because I'm a content person, so a lot of times when we do content, everybody's talking about structure, style, right? Like Hemingway. But that's like
Right.
But the real thing is you. Like, who are you and who's writing to the world? And I was in a conversation with the facilitator, which she talked about, which is an immigrant. And she said, the thing about being an immigrant is that when you move, it feels like you have to prove to everyone that your people are worth it.
Yeah.
So you move around with that weight on you. Sometimes, it's so true. Sometimes it comes to us, we recognize it and we push it away, but it's just there. Like, you feel like you always have to prove you're carrying
Like you're a brand who has just come from somewhere. You need to show yourself in the best light possible.
Exactly. And which is why I really like what you say about giving yourself grace, because you have to give yourself grace.
Yeah, you're doing your best every day, and it's
Yes,
enough that you're doing
exactly.
your best every day.
Yeah.
You don't need.
Yeah.
You need to meet you tomorrow still, and there's just so much you can become and have, and
Yeah,
you don't need to rush the process.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for getting to this point of the episode. Like, that was a really good conversation for me, and I hope it was for you. And again, as I said earlier on, give yourself some grace. You need it, actually, more than you think you do. As usual, please like, share, subscribe. We're on Substack, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram. If you see our stuff out there, please share with people who you think might find it useful. And have a beautiful day. Cheers.